Hello everyone. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and a couple of Sympathy cards using some of the new products from the Picket Studios October 2024 release. I'll have a link to the release in the description box below the video so you can just check out the variety of products that have come out. And then as always, I'll have links to everything I used to make these cards in the description box below as well. Just expand it and it'll all be there. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It is what helps pay the bills and keeps the channel going. So we're going to do a little bit of heat embossing, some die cutting, a little bit of watercolor, splatter, of course. And we're going to make a couple of Sympathy cards. So if you keep watching, I will show you guys how I made these cards. So this is the Graceful Magnolias stamp set illustrated by Kelly Taylor for Picket Studios. And I had to use all the images in the set. I couldn't make up my mind, so I was like, I'm going to do 2 cards. That's just what we're doing. So I've got some Canson XL watercolor paper. One of my kind of main go-to watercolor papers because it's cheap and it works great. And I've already used my anti-static powder on the watercolor paper. That just prevents the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped images. And I stamp the images multiple times with clear embossing ink. I find especially with watercolor paper, but even just regular cardstock, I stamp images with clear embossing ink more than once. It just guarantees that I actually got everything stamped because a lot of times it's hard to tell. I'll tilt my stamp positioner up in the light too to see the ink because even on screen, like, it's the same for me. You can't see anything. So I tilt it up just like so. It's like, okay, missing a couple spots or whatever. So I would rather stamp a few times and then we're good to go. So stamped all the images. And then for the second panel, I did the individual florals and the leaves again because I wanted extra of the individual leaves. And then I coated everything with some antique gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. And then I'm going to melt this with my heat tool till everything is smooth and melted. If there's any dull greeny areas, you just hit that with the heat tool. Same thing, I always tilt everything in the light just to make sure it's like, okay, it's shiny, it's good to go. So once I've got everything melted, I am using my Artistry by Altenew watercolor palette. I've used this in 1 or 2 videos previously. This palette is newer to me. It's been around for I'm not even sure how long. I like it. The colors are really pretty and yeah, I like it. I don't have like an in-depth review. It's like they're pretty colors, you know, it works great. It watercolors great. So I chose some colors from the palette and I just kind of mixed them up, you know, right in the palette onto one of the little fold outs here. And yeah, and then I'm going to watercolor. And I've super sped this up in editing. This actually did not take me very long. Especially for the leaves because I really am just slapping the color on. It's the florals that I use a little bit of restraint for once. But I mixed 3 different colors for the leaves. Normally I don't like list the colors when it's like a watercolor palette, but these actually are labeled. So I used Fall Harvest, Rainforest, and Tropical Forest for the greenery. And then for these blooms, I am using, I used a little bit of Red Cosmos, but I changed my mind and used mostly like Cherry Blossom for these. And the big thing I did, which for me is something I have to like consciously work at, is you see how I just apply clean water first and then I drop in the color right at the base of the petal and I'm kind of pulling it out. And I'm trying to keep this very soft, you know, almost to white, not quite. And if you've watched enough of my videos, you would know I am very heavy-handed with color. White space and keeping things very soft, not my forte. You know, I'm just slapping the color on and doing my thing. But I did it this time. Or at least I was really happy with my results. Because, yeah, usually I would do these very intense. Although with Magnolias, they do come in a very bright sort of like fuchsia color, which love. but I wanted to keep these a little softer since I decided to make them into sympathy cards. So worked my way around. I did the individual blooms, and I'm doing this one. Right there, I applied way too much color, but I just took my watercolor brush, and all it had was clean water on it, and I made the brush mostly dry, so it was like a thirsty brush, and I just kind of soaked up and wiped off that excess color. Fixed it, was able to go on and keep painting the rest. So I just kept working my way around. I'd add clean water, drop in a bit of the color, and then pull it out with the bigger brush. I'm using just Altenew watercolor brushes. I bought these several months ago, and I've been really, really happy with them. And then the branch I did with browns, of course, and then the rest of the greenery I did the exact same as I did the individual leaves, so that everything is, consistent. And then the flower centers, I just do a little bit of yellow, and that was it. And then I just let everything dry, and I die cut them with the coordinating wafer dies, just like so. And then for the sentiment, I actually couldn't make up my mind. I'm using the With Sympathy sentiment that comes in the set. And I started with this just scrap of brown cardstock. I just kind of dived in my scrap bin and I pulled this out. And I did the same thing. Anti-static powder, stamped the sentiment with clear embossing ink, used that antique gold embossing powder, and then melted this. And at first I was like, nope. You can't even barely see it, but that anti-static powder was kind of messing with it because when I wipe it off, you can see it better. But I wasn't sure, so I grabbed another scrap from my little scrap bin of this like olive cardstock. Both of these cardstocks, I have no idea where they came from, what brand they are. They were just in the stash, and the colors just worked. So I was like, okay. So I did the same thing. Anti-static powder, stamped the sentiment with the clear embossing ink, used the embossing powder. And I thought I was going to go with this one, this more olive tone, and actually ended up changing my mind. So I die cut them with the coordinating wafer dies, and like you can see there in the corner, once I had removed that excess anti-static powder on the brown cardstock, it looked great. And once it was die cut, it looked even better. So who'd have thunk? But I'm actually going to use both. You'll see at the end there. So my card bases are top folding A2 white note cards, and I'm going to stamp the same florals on the inside with Altenew's Pink Diamond ink, which is part of the Cherry Blossom quad. It's the lightest shade. It seemed rather fitting. It's very matchy with that watercolor that I did. So for the first one, I stamped the branch. And then for the second one, I stamped the large open bloom. And then I just took a scrap piece of Post-it tape and I stamped the bottom portion of the bloom on there so I could just create a really quick and simple mask. So I'd stamped it, and then I trimmed this out with my scissors, just cutting right on the line of that stamped image. And then I can place that over the stamped floral on the inside of my card. So that'll mask off that bottom portion. And then I can stamp the more closed bloom, because you can kind of see there on the left of the screen, I'd figured out my arrangement for the card front. So I was kind of mimicking that on the inside of this card. So taking 30 seconds to do a quick little mask, totally worth it. So I got that stamped, and then I removed the mask, and then I've got the blooms like so. And then I took another sentiment from that same set, lined that up, and I'm stamping that with Altenew's Espresso ink, which is from the Coffee Break quad. And I did the same thing on the inside of both cards. And then for my background for the card fronts, I'm using the new A2 Basket Weave cover plate die. I love me cover plate dies, and I love them tone on tone. That's usually what I do, and that was what the original plan. And then it just so happened that when I die cut these, all the pieces stayed in the cardstock, so I didn't have to pop them out, and I went with it because it looks quilted and I love it. But if they had popped out, I just would have adhered the, die cut on top of the white card base, and it would have looked mostly similar. Because I love that tone on tone. It gives a texture without it being super busy, But yeah, when it works and all the pieces stay in place, it's why fight it? Why am I going to sit here and pop out every single one of those pieces? Heck no. So I just made sure when I adhered it to make sure to get glue over everything, and then I stuck my big acrylic blocks on top and just weighed everything down, let that dry, did the same thing to the second card base. And then for the sentiments, I offset the green one just slightly below the the brown one. So it gives it like almost like a little bit of a shadow. And I'll do that off screen with the second one as well. And yeah, either that or I would have just put them, the green ones that I didn't use, I would have just stuck them like in the packaging for the next time I go to use it. But I never really think to offset. And then I see other makers do that with their sentiments. And I'm like, that's right. I love how that looks. So that's what I did. And then I adhered the branch with foam tape. And then after I had rearranged my little floral cluster here, I just took a piece of press and seal, which I keep in my craft room. I normally only use press and seal to like seal all my jars of paste because it just helps keep them from drying out. But it's also nice to do things like this where it'll hold things in place temporarily so I can, flip them over, add my adhesive, that sort of thing, which is exactly what I did. So I flipped over the arrangement, the press and seal's holding everything in place. I put the foam tape on, and then I can flip this back over, press it into the card base, and then remove the press and seal. And then I just stick that little piece back to the box, and I'll reuse it next time. And then I changed my mind, remove that floral, which if it was regular cardstock, I wouldn't have tried to even do that because this foam tape is really strong. But because it was watercolor paper, I was able to pull it off, and I just added another layer because I was using Simon's Big Mama foam tape, which actually isn't that thick. So that just gave it a little extra dimension. And then, of course, we're going to add a bit of splatter. I'm using the new paper splatter in Opaque Gold. This is really pretty. This is more like a very warm gold, almost coppery is what I would call this one. And it's chef's kiss. It's so pretty. So I put a bit of that on a palette, put both card bases into my splat box, and then you just use a fan brush to splatter this onto both of these card fronts. And then let that splatter dry. And yeah, it just can't go wrong with splatter. You can't go wrong with metallic. So once those were dry, I then adhered the Sympathy sentiment to the one with the branch just directly with craft tacky glue. And then this one, I used a couple little foam squares just to even everything out and then pop that on top of all of the die cut pieces. And then once this one was adhered, these cards were complete. I decided not to add any other embellishments. Just kept it to, we've got the shine from the heat embossing and that paper splatter and the sentiment and then my watercoloring, which I love when I'm able to actually have a slightly lighter hand. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Like I said in the intro, all the links to all the things will be in the description box below the video. So you just expand it. That'll all be there for you to check out. Thanks so much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. We'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in another video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!